now I want to introduce our guest. Phil Powell is a registered nurse and certified diabetes educator working at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. He has had type 1 for 19 years and is an avid athlete, spending his free time playing squash, cycling, and hiking. After spending many years struggling with low blood sugar during exercise, he has now found success in reducing the frequency through the use of Dexcom and looping with his Omnipod insulin pump. He enjoys bringing his lived experience to his work in the diabetes center at St. Paul's Hospital and helping others with type 1 live healthier and happier lives. Our second guest expert, Alanna Chambers, is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator from Kelowna, BC. Since completing her training at McGill University, she has focused her career on type 1 and technology. She spent nearly 10 years in the insulin pump industry, has worked with her local diabetes program, and is now focused on insulin pump and CGM education. She's a dynamic speaker, I know, because I've heard her speak, so I can attest to that, known for blending current evidence with practical pearls. Having lived with type 1 since childhood, she understands that daily management takes just as much creativity as art and art as science. Her goal is to help life with type 1 feel even just a bit better. In her spare time, she loves to spend time in the outdoors with her husband and 3 kids and 3 girls, and a new dog who's a boy. I just found that out. All right, so I'm going to hand the session over now to Phil and Alanna.
Thank you.
Unmute, step 1. There, got it figured out. Thank you so much, guys, for coming out. I absolutely love talking to the type 1 community because they're always so passionate, and I appreciate so much that you guys are all out here and, you know, trying to improve whatever it is you're trying to improve, quality of life, control, anything. Yeah, so today we're going to talk about navigating Clarity. Just as a quick overview, Clarity is a software program or an app on your phone that we use to gain a lot of metrics on how your diabetes is doing. It's the main platform that we use for looking at your Dexcom data in clinic. And I had received a teaching session recently as a nurse working in the hospital. And I thought, man, this is good, useful information. Why are we not providing this to all the wonderful type 1 people out in the community? So today, we're going to go over what Clarity is and hopefully make you guys a little bit more comfortable with being able to use it yourself and understanding how to do that. So disclosures, Alanna's done a lot of things. I have less under the table things going on, but I'm working on it. Today's session, we're going to start off just talking about glycemic goals for type 1 diabetes. For the most part, these may be familiar, talking about finger poke blood sugar checks and A1C, but within the realm of using continuous glucose monitors, whether that's Dexcom or Libre, there are maybe new goals that we can teach you about that can help you guide your management of type 1. We're going to explore what it is to use Clarity and look at the different reports it provides. There's a lot of information, and some of it is more useful than others, and we can kind of guide you through what do we primarily look at in the clinics, and what might best give you an idea of what's going on with your diabetes and what things there might be room for change on. Mm-hmm. And finally, feeling confident, so important. Yeah, so hopefully at the end of this, you're just a little bit more comfortable in reflecting on how your sugars are doing, feeling confident in understanding what you need to do if you're facing a certain problem. And certainly if you guys have questions, we'll be here afterwards, ask lots of questions.
Awesome. Great. So as we get started here, as Phil said, we're just going to start by really talking about what our goals are. Looking at reports doesn't do us much good if we don't know what we're striving for, right? So those of you know, this is primarily our finger poke goal. So this is what, if you've lived with diabetes as long as Phil and I have, this was ingrained in our heads for many, many years. This has been around for a long time, but I like to take a step back and go, okay, where do we start? So with our finger poking goals, we were looking for a before meal or a first thing in the morning blood sugar between 4 to 7 for adults, a little bit higher if you're the parent of kids. And then after the meal, about a 5 to 10. So note, it is expected that our blood sugar goes up a little bit when we eat, right? Now, sometimes we look at this and we go, yeah, right. Like, is this achievable? And for some people, we're able to achieve these goals. And for some people, it's really challenging to strive to reach these goals. And the point is that these are our targets. It doesn't mean we're there every day. It's where we're aiming to try to get as close to as we can. Okay, so that's that. And then if we put those two things together with the finger pokes, it lands us with an A1C around that 7%, which is our goal, or 7.5% for kids and teens. So A1C basically looks at kind of our average glucose control over the last 3 months. Now that 7%, and why I want to spend a bit of time on this is because our view on this is changing, but we keep coming back to the 7% A1C. And the reason being is we have an abundance of evidence for A1C targets and this fasting into our post-meal as far as just minimizing those risks of some long-term complications. So these are not numbers that came out of the blue. There's amazing trials that have been done on this. So now as we translate into CGM, what we're trying to see is, okay, what's going to give us similar outcomes as this, which we've been studying for so many years. So that brings us to our CGM goals, Phil.
Yeah. So as Alanna hinted at, we have goals on the use of continuous glucose monitors that are kind of translated from this target goal of 7% for your A1C. So the readings that your Dexcom is taking through the day can be compiled by Clarity and broken down into how much of the day do you spend in certain percentage ranges. So this is referred to your time in range, or you might have heard of time in target before. This is broken down into 5 different groups. The primary one we tend to look at is your time in range, or the amount of time that you spend with a sugar between 3.9 and 10. Our goal for that number is over 70%. And the reason we landed on 70% is, for the most part, when patients are achieving a time in range of 70% or greater, their A1C is 7% or lower. The higher you can get with this number, the better. But it gets progressively more difficult and nobody gets to 100%. So 70% is fantastically difficult already. And as Alanna kind of stressed before, these are targets. Everybody's journey with diabetes is different, and it's just something to look towards, and your circumstances might, make it so that's different for you to get to.
Totally.
Looking at some of the other ranges, we have time above range, or what is sometimes referred to as high and very high. So high refers to sugars that are over 10. Our goal for that is usually 25% or less. And then for very high sugars, that would be sugars that are over 13.9. And our goal for that is 5% of the day or less. When we're looking at low blood sugars, it's broken down into both low and very low. So very low, or low would be under 3.9, and very low would be under 3%. And so our goal for these low ranges is to have their total be 4% of the day or less. Sometimes this can be a little bit misleading because the low range looks at both very low and low, but overall our target for that is 4% or less. And as with all things type 1, we're always trying to minimize those lows. Mm-hmm. So ideally it would be 0. Nobody really gets to 0 either.
Yeah, that's so true, right? So when we're working at improving time in range, and we're going to show you this in the reports, but I want to touch on it now as well. Many people, if you're new to CGM especially, you put on a CGM for the first time, most people are below 50%. Not everyone, but many people, when they start on CGM, have a long ways to go. And you get all this information, you go, well, how do I get from 40 to 70? This feels impossible. And what is usually standing in the way is glycemic variability, because that blood sugar is going up and down and up and down and up and down. And maybe the average is high, but if I try and bring things down a bit, then I'm dropping into the low range, right? So what we really want to look at is if you are struggling, maybe shift your focus a little bit to, okay, what's causing these extreme up and down roller coaster effect? And can I narrow that down a little bit first and then work at bringing myself closer to target? And that's a really important thing to kind of to talk through. And that's something I would challenge you to take to either your endocrinologist or your diabetes educator. If you go in and you're not quite able to get where you want with time range, go, hey, I want to work on my variability. They'll be very impressed. Or maybe you'll teach them a thing, but that's really important. So what we're after is trying to get that curve flat, narrow, and in range. And not, this example is 100% in range. It's almost never 100%. And it's almost never completely flat either. It's flat-ish. We do expect, like I said, that blood sugar will go up when we eat and it will come back down later and with exercise. So it's going to be, we want it more of kind of a rolling hill instead of these big peaks and valleys. That's what we're after. So we'll talk through some of the metrics that we can look at to see how you're doing with that as well. Okay.
Well put, Alanna.
Thanks.
So this next slide is an example of one of the reports that you can receive through the use of Clarity. So this is called an AGP report, and it stands for Ambulatory Glucose Profile. You don't have to remember that, but when you're selecting the reports later, this is the AGP report. So there's a lot of information on this. It might look like a lot at once, but we're just going to kind of break it down into different pieces here. So if you just want to click the next. So in the center here, it gives us that same time and range data that we talked about before. So similar to the previous slide that I spoke on, our goal for that is 70% or higher. You can see for this specific patient, it's 77%. It breaks down low and very low, and just repeating again, our goals for this is 4% or less.
Oh, sorry.
One more. Yeah. And then these last two metrics might be something that's a little bit foreign to you guys, or for you who have not taken a stats course in a long time. So there's two metrics that they provide here. One is your coefficient of variation, and one is your standard deviation. I would encourage you, rather than trying to spend too much mental energy on working out what exactly these mean, just understand that they are a measurement for how much variance you have in your blood sugar, how much you're up and down and kind of varying from a more stable point. Our goals for this coefficient of variation is normally 36% or under. For standard deviation, the equivalent tends to be around 3. And then at the bottom of the profile here, maybe I'll let you go over that, Alanna, because you're doing the flat and arrow.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what you can see on this one here is that, and we'll show you a comparison, because this is someone that's exceeding the goals. Okay. But you can see very narrow, especially overnight. You can see this kind of blue river, very narrow with a little bit of when the river is wider, that's times where we have more variability. It is expected that we have, even in someone meeting their goals, some variability during the day as we eat and exercise and go about our days. And I would say this is probably someone on automated delivery because it's coming down really smoothly overnight. So that's kind of what we're looking for. So when you see this blue river, that's your variability. And compare when we show you the second one here. But this one truly is this kind of flat, narrow in range. That's what we're after. That's the goal. Again, it's going to take time to get there. So then now let's compare it with what a lot of people face. And some people, it's even wider than this, and it's even less time in range. We see so many different glucose profiles, but you can see here where the river here is much wider. And then we can see some of the extremes, like maybe this was a pizza day or something went on that day or forgot to bolus one day and that just threw that outer line out. You can see that there's a lot more variability happening in this person over here. I don't know if you want to elaborate on anything else there, Phil.
No, I think that's sufficient for now.
Yeah, perfect. So when it comes to looking at our data, again, I'm really going to emphasize not being too hard on yourself, right? Because it's easy to go, these are all my metrics, I can't get all my numbers. And if you haven't seen this, and I believe this has been shared in this group a number of times, but the 42 factors that affect our glucose levels, it just tells us exactly why that 100% isn't achievable and why 70% is even difficult to get at. So many things related to food, not just carbohydrate amount, but carbohydrate type. Our fat and protein throw us for a loop. Lots of things around exercise, medication, even sleep. If you're a female, your hormones, you've probably figured out, is throwing things off at different times of the month. Environmental things. So it's just on and on and on and on. So many things, right? So it's seeing what we can pick out some patterns for, and maybe picking one or two of those things to focus on at a time.
Okay, it's time. Let's dive into Clarity. Exciting. Yeah, so for you, those of you who have been able to download the app, you can maybe open it up now, and I'm going to help you just have a look at what it looks like on your phone there. If you're having trouble signing in, the username is the same as your username for your regular Dexcom account, and same with the same password there. So hopefully you guys have been able to sign into this already. So this first image here is of a phone, and it is kind of like the home screen for the Clarity app here. So at the top, You can see they've got data on your standard deviation there. It gives you your average glucose. And it also gives you an estimated A1C. So this looks at how your sugars have been doing, and it gives you what it think your A1C would be over that time period. If you look at the top of the app there's actually different time periods that you're able to select as well. So you can look at the last 2 days, 7 days, 14 days, 30, or 90, depending on what you're trying to reflect on. So if you were seeing how the last week of vacation has affected your blood glucose, looking at the last 90 days might not give you as much information on that. So sometimes it's worth looking at smaller time periods and just seeing what was the effect of those on your diabetes and your management.
Absolutely.
Also included in here is the time and range data that we spoke about before.
Yeah.
And
I'm
so
gonna add, Phil, sorry, can I just say that the time that we look at, usually to make an adjustment to your insulin, you want at least about a 14-day time period, but I'll speak up for the women in the group who have a menstrual cycle. I find it much more effective actually in women to look at 30 days, because if you have one of your weeks that has a lot of fluctuations blended in with that 14-day data, it does throw it off. So just go, okay, I want to take that variable out and look at it as a whole and look at 30 days.
beautiful point. No, absolutely. Please jump in. So at the bottom of your app screen there, the second little button there is reports. So if you click on that, you get a screen that looks like this that pops up. This is the screen that's used to generate the reports, whether it's your AGP or looking at the daily reports, which would be, you can look at the individual days for what your Dexcom has been doing. Other ones that are commonly used, overview, and we're going to talk about the compare report as well. And as with the previous screen, you can select 2 days, 7 days, or different time periods depending on what you're wanting to look at. Once you've selected the time period and the reports that you're wanting to use, you click View Reports, and it will generate a report for you. So this is just starting to show what the report would look like. The main thing I wanted to point out on this is that if you've got a healthcare provider, you're actually able to email these reports to them prior to your appointment or during your appointment, so that they can go over with them with you and see how things have been going with your diabetes. You may find that not all GPs are as familiar with this, but it is growing actually. And I know Dexcom is working really hard to get family practitioners up to speed and more comfortable with this, because we are seeing them more and more. So being able to email these reports and go through them might be something that's valuable if it is a family practitioner who's following your care.
Awesome. So we're going to dive into each of these reports. And before we do, I would love to hear whether you want to say in the chat, or if you want to put unmute yourself or raise your hand, you can as well. And this can be, if you're used to looking at reports, what do you look for first? Or what's your favorite thing to go and look for? And if you've never looked at your reports before, what do you want to find in your reports? Curious to see what the group has to say. Like we say, you can just type in the chat box. I love hearing how even amongst colleagues, we all have very different reports we look at, and it's really interesting. So this is why I love doing this with Phil, because we both look at these differently, and I learn from him. Maybe he learns from me, I don't know. So we're getting a couple things here. I see we look for trends on what time of day we struggle with highs. That's a great thing that you can see. I'm always curious about time and range, time and range, time and range. This group is savvy. You've been doing lots. Time and range, patterns and average. Great. Got some advanced users looking for variability and patterns, time and range, AGP. Got a couple people that are new. They're checking their time and range. A wonderfully well-educated group. I love this. I look at the 2 weeks ago patterns. Oh, this is excellent. Good. So feel free to keep typing things in there. I think it's really interesting to see how we all look at it. No two people look at this data the same. That's for sure. Okay, so as Phil showed you in the app, if you were to be on your desktop computer, it just shows the reports a little bit bigger. They're a little easier to see, but really you can view this either way. So when you open up your Dexcom Clarity in your account, you will see along the left-hand side, you'll have a list of all the reports. So it defaults right away to this overview report. And up at the top, you can choose to click and adjust the time range. So just like we were talking about, you can do ideally at least your 14 days, unless you're trying to look a little closer at something or you want to zoom out a little bit more. And then you have all of your information up at the top here. So there's your average glucose. The GMI is used interchangeably with estimated A1C. Okay. I get a lot of questions about this as far as people saying, well, so in this example, my GMI was 6.9% and I went for an A1C at the lab and it was 7.5, or it was 6.1 and it was different, and which one's more accurate? And there's a lot of debate about that, but there are a lot of things that can throw off your lab A1C. If you're wearing your CGM regularly, so like this person's 100% use or over 90 or 80%, then likely this is actually likely a more accurate indicator, because you're getting that glucose data 24 hours a day. We have things like anemias and different types of groups of people that do have inaccuracies with their A1C. And if you've been clever over the years, some people figure out these last 2 weeks tend to sway that A1C result a little bit more, right? So if you've had more highs or more lows those couple weeks before, sometimes that can throw it off too. Okay, feel free to stick around for questions on that. Anyways, you get your time and range, which many of you are looking for. That shows up here. And then how much you're using your sensor. And right off the bat, it pops out down here your patterns. So this person had a pattern of nighttime highs. So you can go, if I don't know where to start, it's telling me I have a pattern of nighttime highs. Maybe I'm going to explore that a little bit more. And you can click through and it will show you a visual of it. And then there's this best day, which I will get back to. The other thing that you can see, especially I think we have a few parents in this group, is you can click in here to see what your alert settings are set at. So if you want to see what your child, especially if you have a teenager or someone that's more independent with their diabetes and you don't want to have to be hovering over their phone, you can just quickly go in here and see, okay, where are those alert settings? And that is worth revisiting and going, okay, are these set realistic? Are my alarms driving me crazy? Maybe it's because they're set a little bit too tight. We really want these alerts to be set so that they're actionable and not a nuisance. They're meant to be helpful. Okay, so that's your overview. I'll pass it to you for the AGP, Phil.
So here's an example of a possible patient AGP report. I'm actually just going to give you guys a second to have a quick look at this yourself. And if you have any thoughts on what you think about this, any problem areas or things they're doing well, please throw them up in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself and say it as well. So I'm going to give you like a minute to do that.
Sorry, it's a minute for just general questions?
No, just to reflect on this. I'm not going to. Just to go through in your own mind and say, like, what do you think is going right or wrong in this? And if you want, you can throw up your answers in the chat as well.
I would love everyone to pick out one thing that's going well with this report. Anyone?
Mm-hmm.
This person needs more insulin. More background insulin, someone said.
Yeah, potentially. Okay, so let's kind of dive into this a little bit. Oh, the range is flattish.
Yes, variability is small, blue river is narrow. They've been listening.
Green line means, yeah. And so this person is doing spectacular in terms of their variability. Like, this is a very, very tight amount of variability, which is spectacular. They're consistent in their meals and through the day. But if you look at their time and range, it's a pretty large degree lower than what we would want it to be. So yes, I do agree. Like, normally we would be aiming for 70% with this person. And you can look in the top left there and see their estimated A1C based on this data would be 8.3%, which is certainly above our target of 7%. So with somebody like this, they have this lovely flat profile through the day. They've got all of this consistency, this very narrow river, but all of it's slightly too high. So somebody had said maybe they need more background insulin. I think when I would look at something like this, when you're looking at your basal insulin and your background insulin, its job is primarily to keep your blood sugar stable during the periods when you're not eating, when you're not taking bolus or correction insulin. And if you look at the overnight period, they're actually pretty flat. You know, they start off 11.5, 12, and they end up a little under 10. So increasing their basal insulin would certainly lower their sugars, but that might also leave them in a point where their sugar is falling too much overnight, and potentially leading to lows. So this is somebody where if they were able to take corrections and just get down a little bit lower, I think their basal insulin is actually in a reasonable spot, and the amount of insulin they're taking for meals is in a reasonable spot. They just need a correction dose to take them from that average of 10 down to an average of say 8.5, 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly. I always like to think of like, if they go to bed at 1 blood sugar, are they waking up relatively the same? Because what if they went to bed with a blood sugar of 5? They would probably wake up with a 5, right? So this is what we were talking about. We have that flat and arrow. We just need to bring it now into range, and probably there's a lot of fear of lows. I'm assuming in this case is probably what's going on. So they need to slowly get comfortable. Maybe bring it from that 10 down to a 9, down to an 8, and just slowly get there. Let's look at another one.
Okay, AG report 2. So again, I'll give you maybe 30 seconds just to gather your thoughts and throw up some comments there in the chat. So things that you think they're doing well, things that you think that they could maybe improve on. And yes, Stephanie, I'll explain the green dotted lines on this next one.
I'm going to give you a hint on this one. Look at the overnight. So again, let's look for things that are going well. But I favor sleep and not being nervous going to bed. That might be one thing to look at.
Okay, so what do we see? Breakfast spike, yeah, potentially it looks good. That jumped to me for a slight peak after meals. Maybe they need to increase the dinner carb ratio. Yeah, potentially. If somebody's on a pump or using an app, time and range is excellent. Average glucose, yeah. So, you know, when we're analyzing a report, there's a couple of things that we look at. The first that we tend to prioritize most is low blood sugar. So if you look at this patient, you know, 1.1% low, it's my experience that almost everybody with type 1 experiences some amount of lows. So, you know, that's within our target of less than 4. The lower we can get this number, the better, but overall actually doing pretty spectacular on that front. Mm-hmm. Their time in target, 71.4%, meeting our goals for that. And their estimated A1C for that is 6.9%. So, I mean, you could definitely have practitioners who look at this and say, you've met your target for your target range, your A1C looks good. You look at your metrics of variance, your coefficient of variation, you're under 36%. That's great. So this person is doing a lot of things very, very well. They're not spending a ton of time high either. Something that I would have you guys look at is, as Alanna hinted at, that decrease in blood sugar overnight. Yeah. So this is something we very commonly see where people are going to bed with higher sugars, and their basal rate is cranked up perhaps higher than it maybe should be to help get them back to a normal range. Mm-hmm. So for this patient, it's you know, working well at this point to get their sugar down to like a 5 to 6 range. The problem is, as Alanna kind of pointed out earlier, that if this patient went to a bed with a sugar of say 5, 6, 7, they would almost definitely have a low overnight. So when we're looking at overnight sugars, the normal goal that we're kind of aiming for is less than a 2-point change overnight, and kind of the more stability you have in that basal overnight, the better. So looking at that patient, yeah, they've met their targets for time and range, A1C, coefficient of variation, but I would still say that there probably is some room that we could play around with. One, not having them fall so much through the night, because that's definitely putting them at higher risk for lows. Mm-hmm. And then maybe around dinner time, as somebody else had mentioned, that you know, a lot of their meals, breakfast, lunch, they're kind of ending up in a similar spot to where they were beforehand, at the sugar in the 6 to 7 range, whereas that dinner just seems to be trailing a little bit higher, and then it's corrected with that background basal insulin overnight. So overall, still fantastic profile, but looking at, can we improve those dinner time sugars, and then maybe start to flatten out those overnight sugars as well.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I love it. There's so much we can dissect. And if you're someone who's meeting 71% time in range, or you're exceeding your goals, but maybe, I don't know if this is dinner or if this is bedtime snack here. If you have to have a bedtime snack to feed your insulin, not because you're hungry, but because you need to eat, then you need to speak up about that, because we have really good insulins, really good technology. We shouldn't have to eat to feed our insulin. So that is such an important, as a dietitian, it's one thing I believe in more than anything, that we should eat when we're hungry. And be able to find a way to make things fit. So speak up about it, because you may have people that go, oh, awesome, you're my star patient, best one I've seen today, you're good to go, right? So go, yeah, but I'm still struggling with something, right? Okay, so I'm just going to quickly touch on this compare report, which is kind of down the side here. You can get it in the phone app as well. And this is a really good double check one. And the story I'll give an example of is, I remember after having one of my kids, I can't remember which one it was, I felt like my blood sugars were completely wonky. And I got one of my Clarity notifications and I'm like, oh my gosh, I said to my husband, I really need to fix something. And he turns to me and he's being so supportive, and he goes, no, it's okay. It was a bad week. Someone wasn't sleeping, or someone was teething, or whatever it was, right? And I had done this. I was like, no, I went back and I compared with the last period. It's a pattern, right? So I knew that it wasn't just a tough week. And it's never a bad or a good week. It's just that those blood sugars were creeping up for lots of different changes, right? So it can be really neat to go, okay, this is my last 14 days. What was the 14 days before that? So in this person, they may go, you know, I feel like, I would say what jumps out at me first here is probably this kind of midday spike. Has this been a pattern, or was this just I was on holidays, or I had something else going on in life? And it's like, no, I think there is something happening there. Maybe we can work on that lunchtime, either bolus or the insulin amount or the type of food that's being eaten. So it's a really nice way to check back and forth and go, is this a pattern, or is it a one-off? Is it vacation? Right? And it can be also a really nice way to look in and see how you're improving. So if you've made some changes, to go back in and go, okay, I made some adjustments the last time I went to go see my endo, or I did some adjustments myself, or I changed some food I'm eating or something. Did it make a difference? And if I just go, okay, these last 14 days, maybe you'll go, I'm not at 70%, but oh my goodness, look, things are moving in the right direction and there is some improvement. So I think it's a really nice way to kind of go, okay, something's working. What am I going to do next? Or pat yourself on the back. And that part's really exciting, especially for doing any type of changes in treatment, new insulins, new pumps, new systems. That's a really fun one to look at and look back and really reflect on how things have changed.
Can you back up for a second to that last AGP slide? Just to answer the previous question that I had forgotten about the dotted lines. We forgot. Yeah, so when looking at this graph here, the orange line represents your average of all the sugars in the time period that you're looking at. When you're looking at that blue river, that looks at, of all the sugars that you've had in that time period, what is the middle 50% of that? So the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile. And that kind of represents the bulk of your data. And then that dashed line starts to look at even more of it. So the lowest 10% and the highest 90th percentile. So those are kind of like the more outliers for your data.
Yeah. And sometimes, like I say, you get like a weekend where there's a takeout food or something, and you end up with this sharp one, like up here. It's either a couple maybe forgotten boluses or some really challenging foods. So we're not going to treat that. We're going to go, yeah, that happened that day. Right. It's not that it was bad. It just happened. Right. And we can move on from that. We want to really emphasize on the Blue River part more than anything, because life happens.
Life finds a way.
Right.
Okay. And then the last report that we're going to go over is the dailies here, and they are exactly what they sound like. They are a record of the day-to-day that you've had with your Dexcom. So sometimes it's worth looking at the AGP and looking at kind of the condensed version of when they put everything together. But there is value in going into individual days and saying what happened with a specific meal, with a specific activity, or with anything else that might be off. If you were unwell, maybe your sugars are a little bit different, or being more stressed, or on your period, lots of things that are affecting things.
Absolutely.
I guess I'll just quickly jump through these. I'm not going to spend too much. So looking at the very bottom one there, you can see that after that first meal of the day, there was a low. So that might be something where you look at, did I take too much insulin for that meal? Did I eat not enough or not as much as I thought I was going to? That could even just be, I went for a walk afterwards, or I was more active than I thought so. Like my kids suddenly wanted to play, and like, you're not going to say no to that. Definitely could have driven the lows. Other than that, with meals, what we're generally looking for is within about 3 or 4 hours that you're kind of getting back to where we would want you for your target. So within the 4-hour mark, you're kind of back at that, glucose of 7, glucose of 8, at 5 to 10 range. Looking at the second one there, the Saturday, January 11th, again, there's kind of some lows going on, or borderline low there. They might have caught it in time after breakfast. So certainly if you're seeing patterns where you're having lows after a meal, that might be time to start to reflect on, do I need to change something with the insulin? Because maybe if you're active every day after your breakfast, that might mean decreasing the amount of bolus you take, like going off not just necessarily your carb ratio, but reducing it slightly. And with this, I would say talk to your diabetes team to help guide you through that, because activity is tricky. And then kind of another low in the evening there. And then going up to the one after that, the Sunday. So at the start of the day there, you can see a break. And we don't know what happened for this patient here, but this could be their Dexcom ran out and it was 10 days later. And then like they would have been actually quite good then. They put it on immediately if that's what happened, because that was like 1:30 in the morning. But we do see this where people will have their Dexcoms die at a late night and a late point in the night, and then they won't start until the next day. So sometimes just having your Dexcom timed out during the day when you know you're going to be able to change it is good. Other examples this could be is just lost connectivity. Maybe your phone died for a couple of hours and you finally plugged it in. Looking at the meals, first meal, the sugar kind of got back to where it was supposed to, so fairly reasonable overall, and no other significant problems through the day there. And then looking at the very last one on the top there. So if you look partway through the night, you'll see a little jut down there. I don't know if you guys are familiar with compression lows, but this is something that we see all the time with glucose sensors now.
Yeah.
So fun fact, the sensor that you wear doesn't actually read your blood. It reads this watery fluid under your skin called interstitial fluid. And when you lay on it for a long time, it pushes all that fluid away, and it can falsely read that you're having a low blood sugar. We most commonly see this at night because that's when you tend to lay in one spot for a long period of time. But if you're ever looking at your glucose graph and you see you're kind of cruising along, and then all of a sudden there's a very rapid decrease in your blood sugar, that could be an indication that you're having just a compression low and not actual hypoglycemia. If you needed to check, the best way to check is just to do a finger poke check. Also, the way you fix this, if you roll off of the pressured point, roll off of your sensor, your blood sugar should come back up to where it was previously.
Yep, totally.
And then diving a little bit further into the day there. So this might be an example of insulin stacking when you look at the first 3 meals here. So the first one, they have it, 3 hours later, looks like they decided to eat something else again, and they kind of have a little spike. And then it looks like they have another little meal bump there. So they might be giving themselves correction insulin on top of the regular food insulin, and then you can kind of see a low result. So this is one of the reasons that we often encourage people not to take insulin within that 4-hour window, is to avoid stacking. I mean, there's could be lots of other reasons why they're having their low, but this is just one example of what it could be.
Yeah.
And then finally, looking at the alarms here. So the one thing that is very individualized to people is like where they want their high alarms. There's always this balance of how much information do you want and how much useful feedback is good for you versus is it going to drive you crazy and are you going to throw it across the room? One suggestion I had heard from one of the Dexcom reps was that kind of the average of your dotted line arrow is usually a pretty good spot for your high alarm, but this is going to vary a lot person to person. It is good to have them set at a point where it provides you useful information that maybe your pump isn't working properly, or maybe your meal had a little bit more carbohydrates than you thought, but you don't want it driving you crazy. So there's a balance point there.
Absolutely. And someone had asked with a pre-submitted question where you would see if you entered in carbs or you entered in any of your insulin doses. And this is where you would see them. You would see a little icon right along here where the alarms are with the food entries as well. So that is the only place that we can pull those up right now with the current version. Okay, awesome. Okay, so that's our dailies. And then the last one that I want to just bring up quickly is, again, there's a number of you in here that are new to looking at this, or if you're feeling like, where do I even start? When you're back, we got it in the overview, or you can go to patterns, and this is my favorite report, and it's called the best day. And so to go back and go, what was my best day? According to my data here, this person was 93% in range, and to maybe reflect on that, what happened that day? Right. And I would actually argue they're probably riding a little bit on the low side here. Did they have to eat all day to fuel that? Right. And maybe that's actually too much basal insulin. Look how the blood sugar drops down here and then it stays lower. But often we'll see that sometimes hopefully close to where your target is. And just it's a nice place to start sometimes, and know that not every day is going to look exactly like that best day, but kind of learn from your successes for sure. The other thing I want to just touch on, I think we've gone a little bit long on our time here, but if you are in your Clarity app, there's a couple of things that you can do just for some feedback. So one thing you can do is if you go down here in this bottom corner, you can click goals and you can edit what your goals are. So again, we're aiming for 70% time in range, but if you're a long ways from where you're at now, if you're at 40%, maybe you could set that for 50%. Let's look for incremental changes and look, and then you can go back and you're going to go, okay, my last week, how close was I to my goal? The next thing you can do is you can actually toggle on these notifications. And if you turn on these notifications, you will get a little text from Clarity every Sunday. And I love this. So every Sunday I get a bloop, bloop, bloop. Your time in range this week was whatever percent, that's a plus 5% or minus 5%, whatever from the week before. And it's a really nice nudge of, okay, I'm on track. I'm kind of, if you're kind of plus or minus 5% or so, you're kind of stable. If it starts getting really extreme, if that happens, let's say it's the week after Christmas, I may go, okay, well, it was Christmas, right? I'm not going to pay attention. But if I notice a couple weeks in a row that my time in range is slowly declining, then maybe that's an indication that maybe I need to make a change, or maybe I should make an appointment to go in and see the clinic because it's been steadily declining for a while now and I need some help. So I absolutely love this. I don't know if anyone can attest to this in the chat if you have turned this on, but I love this. So go into these notifications and decide which ones you want. I really like the time and range one. The best day one is kind of cool as well. Or you can get it so that you get notified when you reach your goal. So sometimes people like to put their goal a little bit higher so that it goes, hey, great job. You got 80% yesterday. And it's like, oh, awesome. What did I do yesterday that got me at that? So that's a nice little feedback feature that I encourage people to use. Okay, so here's what your notifications would look like on your phone. And they're not a lot. It's just enough to give you a little nudge.
Okay, so just in summary, I would encourage you with everything diabetes, reflect on your data, reflect on how things have been working for you regularly to try and help identify patterns, high, lows, what's working, what's not working. Use the Clarity app notifications to keep track of where you are. It's really easy to forget your diabetes, although it's also really easy not to forget your diabetes. But I think sometimes this is a nice little positive reinforcement on how you're doing.
Totally. And then always don't feel like you need to dissect all this information yourself. So if you notice there's some patterns that feel like, I don't know what to do with this, then this is exactly when we want to go in and see our diabetes team. Sometimes we feel like we need to bring them our perfect numbers, but in fact, we should be bringing them in our information when we need help. Don't ever be ashamed or embarrassed by what you see and that you're not at goal, because then what do we need help for, right? So use your team to help you make those adjustments based on the patterns and talk it through together. And I can't emphasize enough, though, you may not have all your metrics in line, but every little nudge forward, if your time and range is off, but your variability is at goal, then go, hey, at least I'm consistent. Now what can I work towards next? Celebrate those successes. Maybe it's just your best day, but look for the positive and try to keep doing more of the positive, and that's going to help move you along. Okay. All right. So I think we're going to open up here for questions now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is I can tell it's a very awesome group.
I wrote one in the chat, and I do actually, my son's in the car waiting for me to take him to practice. So I'm just gonna jump in. My clarity report has like very low, what the word is, like time that it's reading.
Okay.
Inactive.
Yeah. And a lot of the times it's overnight or when my daughter's in school that it says it's not reading, and it's not. I know that's not true because we are up several times a night and we always check her receiver. And except for the rare times when she lies on it and we get noticed, it's reading. So it's data that I know is there, and then it's not showing up in the reports.
So are you using a receiver and a phone, or just a
Well,
receiver?
I'm using a receiver, but I think I'm using a receiver and a phone because I did get the receiver like a few days after we connected with my phone.
Okay. And are you uploading the receiver, or are you just looking at clarity on your
Yeah.
phone?
No, yeah, I'm connecting it like with a USB, like to my laptop every
Interesting.
couple weeks.
The only other thing could be is adjusting your date range. So if you're getting a little bit of data pulled in from your phone, and so it's got, say, something from today picked up from your phone, but the receiver was maybe uploaded 2 days ago, then there's a big data gap there. So if you were to go and make your date range the day you last uploaded, that might be what it is.
Okay. Or could I somehow undo my phone, like have it be reading from the receiver and not my phone?
Yeah, I think you would have to exit out of your Dexcom G6 app, I guess.
You can even
Okay.
unpair the Bluetooth from your phone.
Thank you.
Okay. I bet that's what it is. There
are so many tech rabbit holes with Dexcom and this, and I have regular talks with the our staff from there, and it is tricky. So you could also reach out to them and see if they have any further ideas, because some of these can get a little bit tricky, and they have ways to look at your transmitter and sometimes have solutions that are harder for us to provide.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I think that is what's happening. So thanks so much. I'm going to go now. This was really helpful. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
I think you have a question in the chat box, Alanna. A couple questions.
Oh, I'm not following those as good.
I'm looking on my laptop. I cannot find where goals are. Which page should I go to?
So the goals is something that's specifically in the app, not in the desktop one. So that is the goals for the app to send you those little notifications of how are you doing compared with goal. You can go into your clarity settings and adjust that. What is that target range for you? I do encourage people to stick with that default 3.9 to 10 target range, unless you have very specific targets for various reasons that you've talked with your team about. But that is just kind of the standard, that if you do change those, sometimes we go in and we look at your time and range and it's very different, and we can quickly make an assumption without realizing, oh, they've changed it. It's not set at that 3.9 to 10. So yeah, so the goals are separate. Those are in the Clarity app. And let's just see what else in here. Anything else? If there's no questions, is there anything that anyone's going to look at differently now, or what are you excited to follow after seeing this session? I'm curious.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
I've been using Dexcom and Clarity since February, and thanks to Phil, who introduced it to me. It's been amazing how it's changed my ability to understand what's really going on. The biggest benefit is overnight. I used to get lows and got some really bad ones. This now alerts me ahead of time, and I've learned, because of what it's telling me, whether I need to, if it's too high, to take a couple of units of insulin, or if it's too low, what works best. Instead of overloading myself, which I used to do, too many carbs, I can see what amount of carbs will bring me into a safe zone and keep me there until morning. Honestly, it's been amazing. It's brought my A1C down 0.5%, which I've never seen in the last 15 years because of my being able to see what effect different activities and different foods have on my glucose. So I'm a huge fan.
I'm so glad to hear that, Robert. Bob.
Yeah.
I was
Thanks,
so
Phil.
thrilled when you went on Dexcom, and I'm so happy to hear that you're doing exceptionally well with it and finding.
I am. Today I was 78 in range. Which,
amazing.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. But I might be talking to you about pumps as well. So you never know. Save that for the next session. But I really I speak highly of Dexcom. I speak to everybody about it. I've talked to medical professionals about the benefits. So I'm waiting for a commission check. So thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Information is power, isn't it? Like, it's one thing to feel like, oh my gosh, things are out of whack and I don't know why. What do I do about it? And then you log in and you're like, oh, this is what's going on. I see what's happening every day after breakfast, or I see what's happening every night. This is why it feels this way, right? I always feel like as a healthcare professional, never before have I felt like I can mind read as when people come in with CGM data. And it's like, oh, they can actually understand what's going on, because you can, right?
Absolutely.
I love this comment from Melanie. Tonight made me realize that I'm doing better than I thought and I should stop beating myself up. Absolutely. Find the positive.
May I
There's-
ask a question? Oh,
Absolutely.
I was going to say that there's an excellent book. It's by the author who Adam Brown, I believe, who did that 42 Things That Affect Your Blood Sugar, but Bright Spots and Landmines. And I read that after maybe 15 years of type 1. And it was still just a good reminder that, like, you do so many things correct, and beating yourself up over like a low blood sugar, or I should have done that, or I shouldn't have had that slice of pizza. Like, there are so many positive choices you make, even just being out here and being motivated to be here, that, like, it's easy to say don't beat yourself up, but you know, self-love is important, and celebrate all the things that you're doing well.
can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Janet.
Well, I've been a diabetic for type 1 for 50 years, and I'm very brittle. So I lost my driver's license, in the last couple of years because of driving around with a low blood sugar, and my accident history. So I did get it back recently, and it's because of the Dexcom and the alarm system. I don't have those low blood sugars because I get the warning now, but my blood sugars are still, between 10 and 20 all the time. I just can't. They try and try at the clinic, but I seem to be as sensitive to food as I am to the insulin. It's just, and to anything, it just seems to be all over. But anyway, that's for me to try and work out. But I'm very grateful. I've wanted for years for them to have something like this with the alarm. I do wish the Dexcom had something, because just recently my diabetic nurses had me enter the food, the carbs, and the insulin on there. But, sometimes I forget, and then I have no way of going back in right away to see if I've entered it. You can't go back in and read the Dexcom right away. It won't let you go in to see what you've entered. And that annoys me, as well as the fact that when you eat something to correct a low blood sugar, you can't shut off the alarm. You have to wait it out until your blood sugar gets back up to normal. And sometimes that takes a while.
Yeah.
And so everybody has to listen to the beep. And when you're in a meeting or something like that, it's embarrassing. You have to just excuse yourself and try to bury it in the bottom of your handbag. I wish there was a button that you could press that says I've treated it, and
kind of shut it off or something. I wish there was, maybe there's something in there that I don't know about, but I've never discovered.
You know, it's interesting with that low alarm. I've had a few people when they're new to Dexcom that, especially when you're low, you just want to deal with it, and you acknowledge it on your lock screen, but you don't actually go in and clear it. So it will continue to beep because it wants you to acknowledge that you actually.
What do you mean?
Alarm.
What do you mean?
So if you go into your app and actually, yes, and tell it, and confirm that you've gotten that
hit
alert.
The 1 and the 2 and the OK button, you mean, or what?
What type of phone do you use? Are you an Android?
I don't use a phone. I just use the Dexcom.
Gotcha. Oh, I'm trying to remember what that's. Haven't used the receiver in a while. Just make sure that you're acknowledging it. So read what it says on the screen and make sure you're hitting OK or whatever it's telling you. You can also go in and change your alert sounds. And sometimes people don't think that, right?
I wondered about that because I accidentally changed the sound one day and it didn't seem to me it was as loud as the one I had on there before, which was brutal.
Yeah.
And I just accidentally changed it. And I said to my husband, oh, that doesn't seem nearly as bad. But I don't know what it was I changed it to. So I should play around with them.
Their sounds is absolutely worth it. And it doesn't have to be a permanent change. It could be I'm going to a wedding or a funeral or a play or something. And I want this to be a little bit quieter. And then just go in and change it either to vibrate or to a lower sound so that it's not going off so much.
Yeah, maybe I should just play around with them and see which one it is that's the quietest. Yeah. Because I don't need a really loud one, you know, and at night it drives my husband nuts.
There you go.
Yeah.
But and then it is worth maybe revisiting or talking with your team about what your alert thresholds are set at. And if it's going off all the time, then is it set not quite realistic? So
I didn't even bother setting it for the highs, or it would really drive me crazy because it's always high. But I did set it at 5.5, which is kind of normal, right? So when it reaches 5.5, I treat it, but you know, sometimes it just keeps dropping and you know, it'll beep and beep and beep and beep, and I'm drinking orange juice and I'm eating and it takes forever for it to come back up. You know, so that's annoying. I wish there was something they could do to it to improve that. And I also wish there was some way you could go in and read it to see what you've done. I mean, I'm 76 years old and my memory isn't as good as it used to be. So I think, well, did I enter it? You know, and then I have to go in and enter it again. So I'm probably entering it twice, you know, my insulin or something. So I have to explain to the nurse that, you know, I may have entered it twice or, you know.
I know it's interesting, right? I think with all of these diabetes technology devices, there's always room for improvement. So we just wait at the edge of our seats for that next generation to come out. And I think every company does such a good job of really trying to hear what people are saying. There are limitations for sure as far as what we can't do, but it's always exciting to see what's going to come out in that next generation. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I want to be really mindful of time because usually these sessions are from 6 to 7 and we're a couple minutes over. I want to thank Phil and Alanna for such an educational, but you know, based on the comments in the chat box, a hopeful and inspirational talk. So no, I think that's great. I think when you can make someone feel as if, oh my God, there's a, you know, I can really control this and I can really have a, you know, have a handle on it. It's a sense of, you know, that sense of powerlessness goes away. So I'm so happy you both came here today, and hopefully you're willing to come back to talk about freestyle if that's also your area of expertise. We're, you know, again, we're continuously looking for ideas for the huddle. So, you know, whoever's on screen right now, if there's another topic that, you know, that you really want to hear about, just let us know, because I'm, you know, I think we're pretty good at finding the experts and the speakers who can talk about what you care about the most. Okay, so thank you. I'm going to clap for the presentation and we hope to see you back in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. This is an amazing group, and what you've done, Dr. Tang, is really incredible that we have this support for people living with type 1, because being out there on your own is no fun. So keep showing up. If you learn 1 or 2 things, it's worth it. Yeah, so thank you.
All right. Phil, did you want to say goodbye or anything?
I do, and I actually want to say an unrelated thing, but I'm going to be quick. If any of you have not yet talked to your team about the disability tax credit, go and do that, because they will potentially give you a big chunk of money. They can credit you up to 10 years, up to $2,000 per year. It could be a vacation. So if you've not already done that, go talk to somebody.
Thank you for that information. See, you're just every time you talk, you're instilling hope.
I love it.
All right. Everything that comes out of your mouth is hope. All right. So have a nice night, everyone.
All right. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.